Okay, hello, welcome to another video. So, um, in the last video I made, I'll be honest, there was a bit of waffle. It was a little bit waffly. There was not much of a structure, but today there is more of a structure, so that's good news for you guys. I want to talk about basically something I wrote in my diary, journal this evening, which I found very useful, and I'm hoping that maybe you guys will find it useful. So, yeah. Basically, what I wanted to talk about was inadequacy, like not feeling good enough. Whether that is not feeling good enough compared to other people, like your partner or friends, just relationships in general, whether romantic or platonic, and also just that feeling of not being good enough just for yourself, like not being where you should be in life, because I sometimes struggle with that. So, hence writing about it. And basically, what I wrote about, and I'm sure there's lots of people who can kind of relate to this kind of thing, is sometimes you meet these people and they have just lived awesome lives, just like they've just done loads of cool stuff, just fantastic stuff, and you meet these people and you're just blown away. And like awesome to meet these people, but then I don't know if anyone else is the way that I am, but sometimes you think in the back of your head, like, how do I compare up to these people? Like, you can't help but kind of compare your life against theirs, and you think they've done so much cool stuff, and I've not done anything that cool. And that actually kind of saps the joy out of the experience of just meeting someone interesting, spending time with someone interesting with stories to tell and, fun, interesting life. Suddenly you kind of just feel bad about yourself. It's like, what? It's a horrible feeling, because actually it's not always a true feeling, that feeling of not being good enough. I just think it's sometimes a bit of a harsh comparison, which is kind of what I go on to say. And I suppose I wrote this as almost like a letter, kind of for myself, but I suppose kind of for you guys. So we'll just go with it. And I sort of explain this feeling of being inadequate sometimes when you compare yourself to others, but it's not entirely justified, and it doesn't wholly make sense. Because and the reason it doesn't make sense is because life is not a race; it's not a competition. It's just life and how you choose to spend it, and who's to say what is a life well lived and a life that's poorly lived? Ultimately, you are the sole person who decides whether your life has been well lived, really. Other people may assess your life against their own standards or their own criteria for a well-lived life, but that their criteria on whether or not your life meets it does not necessarily make it true or false. And this is the other thing. You would not be who you are today if you hadn't had the experiences that you've had in your life. If you go back and change something, then suddenly you're no longer the same person. And maybe you lose something. Maybe you lose a bit of humility, or you lose a bit of appreciation of values. I think it's a risky thought experiment, not that it's one that you can actually enact, but you don't know what the other forks in the road could have turned out for in your life. Not fully. And this is the thing, if everything went perfectly in your life, do you think you would value your successes, your high points, your moments of happiness, if you never suffered the bitterness of failure? And I wrote, it is my sincere belief that failure is the price of success. And I think that is true. To succeed, you have to be willing to fail. And to succeed, generally speaking, you have to fail. It's unavoidable. And that's success in however you define it. There's failure in all realms of life as well as there's success. Now, I predicted probably the argument against this. You may say, well, I feel like I'm unsuccessful now. And yes, those past experiences make who I am today. But maybe you don't actually like who you are today. fine. My past experiences inform my current present self, but actually I don't like my current present self. I don't feel like that's good enough. So is that a moot point? Yeah, I hear that point. I think it's painful. I think I've been there myself. And it's particularly painful to feel that, especially when you don't feel good enough as a person yourself already, and then you start to compare yourself to others, and it's incredibly toxic for your self-esteem, for your mental health. It's a bloody vicious cycle, to be honest. But then I sort of spoke a little bit more about comparisons, because that's what a lot of this feeling of not being good enough is really about. It's about comparisons. If there were no other humans in the world to compare ourselves to, well, we probably would be lonely, but it wouldn't be the same, would it? And I think we live in an age where you have social media, the internet, modern media. There is hundreds of, well, not even hundreds, there's like millions of people who are all better than you that you can compare yourself to. But this is the thing. Millions is maybe a big number, but you know what I mean. But this is the thing about comparisons. It's very easy to forget that we do not make fair comparisons as human beings. We really don't. Because we compare our lives, which we see the full spectrum of. You see every good point, every low point, every time you get food poisoning, every time you feel like you a king on earth or a queen on earth. You see everything. But then you go and compare your life to someone else's, and what you are comparing against is their highlight reel. You can only see what they present often, especially if it's someone on social media, something online, then you can literally only see what they present. But even people you know in real life, you still see the persona that they put out to the world. And sometimes that persona, the way they interact with the world and with you, can be very different to how their life actually feels. But nonetheless, we'll make these unfair comparisons. And I think deep down we all kind of know it's not revolutionary to say to people that actually we make unfair comparisons. We know it's true. But without actually climbing out of your brain, your body, your vessel, and tootling over to the other person's brain, getting in their body, seeing what their life's like, will you ever really know what their life is like? You can never truly walk in someone else's shoes that way. You can never fully experience that. And therefore, you cannot make probably a whole comparison or a fair comparison because you don't have all the facts. Fine, you can compare someone's race time to yours, fine. Whoever runs 100 meters fast is fine. But life is not that arbitrary. There's so many factors. And you cannot compare for those factors when assessing your life and comparing your life against someone else. It's impossible. It's impossible to make a fair comparison, really, if we're honest. And so this is the thing. How often do we hear of, maybe it's people in our personal lives or people in the public eye, who seemingly lead these very perfect lives, these very put together lives, and then you hear something, or perhaps they tell you something, they confide in you that actually not everything is perfect. Perhaps they haven't got a good home life, or their marriage is falling apart, or their health is falling apart, or they're suffering through a bereavement. You don't know. And so many times people will carry these things and they will never tell you unless they're close to you. So all that's to say is it's very, very difficult not to compare yourself, and we all will do it. We'll probably all will continue to do it. But I think it's important to remember that actually there's not always a lot of truth to these comparisons. And even when we feel like there is truth to them, you have no idea what that life of that person is actually like. I mean, let's say that you could walk into someone else's life. What benefit would it really have? You wouldn't swap your life for theirs and then instantly be happy, because you'd still be who you are. If you become another person, you're no longer yourself, it doesn't matter. So you have to do the argument from the point of you stay who you are in your brain, in your head, but you get to live into their life. And you jump into their life. But it wouldn't matter because you're still you. You know, you change the vessel, you change the body. But what do? You have to adapt their values, their, imagine it's impossible to just jump into someone else's life. And it almost sounds like a good setup for a horror story, that kind of thought experiment, swapping into someone else's life. In a way, I think that's a horror story because you lose yourself. And how low do you have to be to give up yourself for someone else's life, which you have no idea. It's a complete roll of the dice. It may look great, but you don't know. And this is the thing. Remove that thought experiment because it's not possible. Reality, your current vessel, your current ship, the current flesh and bones in your body, that's all you've got. That's all you got. And it's easy to forget to be grateful for what we do have because you don't know that body that you might jump into, what's wrong with it, or what's wrong with that life. Health, time, family, love, friends, financials, whatever it is. I'm sure there'll be some people who are, maybe don't have any of those things, but there'll also be a lot of people who probably have a few of those things. And there are people out there who have more than what you have today, and they would trade one of those things that perhaps you've forgotten to be grateful for everything they have, for your time, for your health, your youth, your age, your love. These things are priceless. And there are people out there who would absolutely swap all of the materialistic things they have for what you have. And I'm not saying that all comparisons are just solely materialistic, but I'm just trying to make a point. And also, this is another thing. I'm not here to demonize that feeling of inadequacy. I don't think it's always bad. I think sometimes it can be a positive thing. Because I think there's a drive to that feeling sometimes. Sometimes you can make that little bit of a comparison, but it pushes you. It pushes you because you realize, actually, I can be better. I can do better. It's very closely tied to ambition. This is what I wrote. I said it's very closely tied to ambition. Sometimes that feeling of not being quite good enough can push us to put our best foot forward and to actualize our dreams and to chase for something. But it can also be dangerous because it can develop into self-hatred of not feeling good enough. But it can also be self-love. And I think it's really important to toe that line. I don't think that we should never aspire to anything. We should never be ambitious. But if we're talking about inadequacy, it's tied very close to ambition because ambition is wanting more. Sometimes we want more because we don't feel like what we have is enough or don't feel good enough. Can you want more whilst being happy with what you have? Being grateful and content? I think you can. I think you can be happy for yourself and want the best for yourself and want the most for yourself and want yourself to develop. But it's a very tricky line to balance on, I'll admit that. Because how do you cross those two things of wanting more, but also, I'm not saying it's easy, and I'm not saying that I'm a super wise person with the answers. I don't. This is just what I wrote down. So yeah, don't let it be a stick to beat yourself with. And I had this really cool metaphor that came to my mind about thinking about our lives. This is just to basically wrap everything up. Think of your life as being like a home. If you picture it in your head as being like your house, your flat, wherever you live, your life is like your home. And all the hallways and the different rooms, these all capture the different aspects of your life, all these various little intricacies of your life. And so when we make these comparisons, it's like we're looking at someone else's life, and it's like you're seeing these beautiful villas on the lake or by the beach, or these fancy high-rise properties, these gorgeous, gorgeous properties. And you look into these places and you think, wow. And then that sense of inadequacy kicks in. And you kind of look back over your shoulder at where you live, and it feels a bit smaller, feels a bit dull, a bit dark, a bit dingy. Suddenly it doesn't look that great or feel that exciting anymore. And you think, oh, where I am is a bit crap compared. And the joy sucked out of the room, sucked out of the home in that moment. But what we fail to see, this is kind of summarizing what I've said, what we fail to see when we're making these comparisons is you don't see the holes in the roof of this supposedly perfect person's life. You don't see the holes in the roof. You don't see the leaks when it rains. You don't see the cracks in the foundations. You do not see the cold, lonely nights of the owner when the heating breaks. You don't hear the noisy neighbours. You do not see all the problems with this place. You never truly see the house. It's like going on a viewing, but you only get 5 minutes. You don't really get to look in the drawers, inspect behind the wardrobe, see the damp and the mould in the corner, the cockroach infestation beneath the floorboards. You don't see it. You just see the polished exterior, and you think, wow, that looks good. So what is the point? My point is this. Look after your home, look after your life, and enjoy it. Make sure you decorate. Put some pictures on the walls. Have friends round for dinner. Throw parties in the garden. Keep pets in the house for the house's soul. And fix the holes in the roof. Sweep the pathways. Check the foundations. Stock up the larder, whatever it is. Clean in the spring and protect your home for the winter. Because that's the only home you get. If we're using this as an analogy as your life, this is like a house you can't move out of. And if you couldn't move out of that house, how would you treat it? You would love it. You would fill it with beautiful things that you love, and beautiful people that you love spending time with would be there every second you could fit them in. And you wouldn't ignore the hole in the roof. You'd be fixing that as soon as you could. And sure, you might see a nice house on the pathway and think, oh, I like what they've done with the garden. And maybe you, a little bit of ambition, you think, I could do something like that with my hedge. Fine, do it. But you're not remodeling that entire house, trying to change your cottage into a high-rise apartment. It doesn't work. Because that's not you, that's not your life. And of course, the inspiration is there and you can change things. But without going too far without this metaphor, what I'm trying to say is, don't get so caught up in the estate agent's logbook looking at different houses that you forget to love your own and decorate your own. It's not a hotel room, it's your home. And yeah, that was basically all I wrote. And I really kind of felt connected to writing all of that. It felt really good and it felt important. So I thought I would share it. And so, yeah, hopefully you enjoyed it. Perhaps a little bit more put together than my last video, I hope. But I'm not really trying to over-engineer these videos too much. I think just kind of enjoy just throwing them out there as they are. So, and if one person watches it and enjoys it, fantastic, why not? But yeah, peace. Have a good evening.